Swordfish. It was like awful.
No, I love Swordfish.
I know that movie.
I love.
Are you kidding me?
So I was so embarrassed. Should I save this stuff for the podcast?
No, we're recording. This is in the podcast.
Oh, geez. Oh, I didn't realize we started.
This is it.
No, so I'll tell you. But like, so I was at McAfee at the time, and we actually had the bus branded, the bus in the movie. And if you look really carefully, you can see it under, because they painted over it. We paid a lot of money to have that bus branded, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but apparently they can just pull that at any time. But they would call me up and say, give me technical words. And I'd be like, I don't know, firewall and, antivirus. And then when I saw how they used it, I was worried for my career because I didn't know the movie was going to be a smash hit or even who was in it at the time. And
that's so funny. I think of that.
Dude, that's like, incredible.
Career, I'm going to be like so screwed if my name is associated with a movie that gets, like when they say, they got past the firewall, and you're sitting in the audience going, that's not a firewall. Yeah. Like, really? It was one of those. But yeah.
We got the mainframe. Quote, unquote, Sam Curry.
We got the mainframe. Like, really? Like, I used to be a mainframe product manager, and I usually don't tell people that, but now people are going to make fun of me who know that, and then, but the one that I'm actually in IMDb for is Reveries of the Connected World. And that is, it was at Sundance. And it says playing self. So I'm in there as me. I would have tried someone else, but I don't know how to do that. So
what?
So
you should splice in a cut right now of Sam of how long you in the movie.
He took a lot of footage over 2 days, and he said he was going to use it for other things. But like, I don't want to sound like super. I'll tell you anyway. So I was writing in my notebook. I used to write with an alphabet that I used for myself, which was derived from Greek, and I used to write backwards because I didn't want people to know how bored I was in meetings, and I would like write stuff. And he saw it, and he's a classic scholar. So we just started talking, and we talked for 2 days. The man is fascinating, and we still talk. Well, we haven't for a couple of years, but until quite recently, we still talked about classical languages. He's into everything, like everything. And we talked about how culture and AI in particular was going to impact how we live, and it's all actually coming true, stuff we talked about in 2014. But he was a fascinating man. And like, I see him every now and then, I'm like, I know him. That's really cool. But yeah.
Well,
I'm going to say that about you now. When I put you up on
2 degrees. 2 degrees.
Yeah.
That puts you 2 degrees from The Mandalorian now. So yeah, there's that. Because he was in that. I was watching. I'm like, I forgot he was in this. Yeah.
I don't know how you're embarrassed by the swordfish thing.
Yeah, I don't know why you're embarrassed by that. That's like amazing.
You gotta like cast yourself back to 2000. I think it was 2002, and like and be like, I was fairly junior. I was chief security architect for Network Associates, but I was in the .com division. I ran product, and you got to think, cyber was much smaller, and I would have to be worried about my reputation as a security expert.
Yeah.
And somebody goes, man, that guy does not know he just doesn't know his shit. Like and I was like, career versus movie. And I'm like, well, I'm not an actor. So, yeah. That happened. Well, it was really...
Travolta
they didn't ask me because I was special.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was Travolta.
But they didn't ask me because I was special.
Yeah.
They asked me because the company was doing product placement. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would lead with that. If I had anything to do with it, I would, no matter whatever interaction, like if the plumber came over, I would lead with my part in the swordfish.
Yeah. Did you know
my wife was on John Travolta? My wife was on Say Yes to the Dress. She was on the show, right? So I usually lead with that because she's cooler than me. Yeah, she's way cooler than me. But hey, we shouldn't be talking about me. You're the guest, and we should.
All right, let's do the intro roll, and then.
Yeah. Well, after that, I don't know. Like.
All right, welcome to On the Hook, the security podcast you actually want to listen to, with stories from hackers, security pros, information warfare specialists, and privacy experts. Sam, you're up.
Yep. Hi, my name's Sam Curry. I'm Chief Information Security Officer at Zscaler. I used to work with Jacob, and we just really like hanging out and talking together. I'm also a visiting fellow now at the National Security Institute, and looking to having a super amount of fun with our guest and moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Jacob, field CISO at Clumio, and over to John.
I am John Dwyer. I'm the head of research at IBM Security, X-Force.
X-Force, which is, how is that different from IBM Security?
It used to be ISS, right?
That
was
used to be ISS. He knows his history. Yeah. So there was a company that they acquired, and one of their products was called X-Force, and then just became branded the whole thing.
2007, 6, 7,
something like that.
Yeah, we nearly acquired ISS when I was at Computer Associates, but IBM beat us to the punch. Yeah.
I was just actually when I was in Austin, I found like an old push cart, like a data center cart that had ISS written on it.
You take it home?
Nice. It's the Preventia cart.
It's a relic.
What was it?
Some things persist, right? Crash carts persist over time.
That was one of the names. They probably used that to get all the Preventia appliances around. What was the other brand name? It was like Real something. Anyway, yeah. I should save that for my shrink. But yeah, I used to love the IDS stuff, and then they went all IPS, right? Intrusion prevention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how much of the X-Force team from those days is still there? Is it a lot of the people who've been in it for like 16, 17 years, or is it younger team now?
Younger. I mean, like, I think a lot of the folks that came over through that acquisition who have stayed around are more in the higher levels of IBM security now, kind of just out of X-Force. I've been at X-Force for going on 6 years, and I feel like I have one of the longest tenures in there. So it relatively new, I think it was.
That's not a bad thing. I mean, there's a lot of mobility in our industry anyway. Staying 6 years is an eternity almost in our industry.
Before that, I mean, I had bounced around to all kind of different things, and it's been a really great opportunity to me. And they started in 2017 with like revitalizing. They wanted to invest in these new areas of cybersecurity, and when I came on board, and then I've been able to just kind of like bounce around the things that I'm interested in.
How did you get into research? What made you say this is the thing to do, or did you have a moment like that? Was it like, oh, I guess I'm here now?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's a long story. But so when I went to graduate school and this was back 10 years ago, and I went to school at that time like an information security or cybersecurity. This was like when it was first starting, right? So I got out of that, and before that, I've been doing enterprise architecture stuff, so build and manage Active Directory and
the IT side of the house, not security.
IT, but like away from cyber.
Yeah. And then I went to grad school for it and graduated. And I was like, I know that I want to be in this space, but there's like 11,000 different domains in cybersecurity. I have no idea what I wanted to do. So I started, doing engineering for a forensics lab at MIT, and that kind of pivoted into cybersecurity. So I was still doing IT, but it was like I got hands-on experience with cybersecurity from a digital forensics point of view.
MIT in Boston, or was it like with the Lincoln Labs partnership?
It was Lincoln Labs, you're right, which was
up by Hanscom. Yeah.
It's on Hanscom Air Force Base. Yeah. And that's how I got into research, is that I started, just through the connections that I built there. People were like, wow, you know what we have? Why don't we come over? Like, you have this unique kind of skill set where you understand the IT piece, you understand the security piece, and I think we could really find a role for you in the Defensive Cyber Operations Research Division. And I did that for a long time. And so through that, we would help develop tools for the warfighter, because we used to say, how do you extend incident response or threat hunting to the tactical edge, right? So if you have some E5 in the middle of Afghanistan with basically no IT,
no technology experience,
no technology, how do you extend cybersecurity in incident response to that laptop, right?
Right.
And through that process, I loved that job. Like that, I love my job right now, but like in terms of like rewarding jobs that I ever had, like that's it. Because I felt like felt impactful. I got to know the cyber protection teams out of the Army really well. I got to actually talk to the people. But what I realized is that us in R&D and academia is like, in talking with the warfighter, I was like, we're trying to solve problem 962. The warfighter's on problem 4, right?
Yeah.
And so like we're coming up with all these like solutions in our little like laboratory here, and you know they're rubbing two sticks together on the other side in this. And I was like, I want to do this work. I think, you know, cybersecurity research and development is what I want to do for the rest of my life. But I can't do that disconnect anymore. So I was like, I told myself, I was like, I got to go do the job. Before I can research, I got to go do the job, which is when I pivoted to X-Force to do incident response and threat hunting. And I did that for, you know, 4.5, almost 5 years before I was like, okay, I got it. And I was building tools for X-Force, and I was like, I'm ready to now go right back into that, and
into
then
the academic
start
world.
building, into that research development, and start building tools and services for the consultants now in that same kind of manner that I was before. But now I actually know what goes into it and like what they actually need, actually living that life, you know? So that was my story. Is like, I just kind of like circled back, and I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it right. So let's just hop into the trenches, so to speak. And
are there any projects that you worked on that are declassified that you can talk about, or is everything that you did at Lincoln Labs on the classified side?
Yeah, everything. I can't really talk about it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but there's very similar sort of work that I did at IBM that we can talk about that is kind of like right in that same avenue, because the problems of a global consulting firm aren't all that different from a global military operation, really.
I'm just going to assume you built space lasers that zap things.
God. Do you know what? We used to go to these, they had these things called lab talks, right? And they were for any division out there. So Lincoln does research in like 14, 15 different areas, right? And see people like microbiology or tracking near Earth orbit objects. And so I'd go to these lab talks, and I would sit there, and it was like drinking a fire hose of imposter syndrome, because I was like, everyone in this room is so smart, and I'm sitting there Googling words. I was like, I don't know what that word means. Like, I know he's speaking English, right? And I know that, but the words that are coming out of his mouth,
so
I don't understand.
One of those. I gave one of those in 2013 about the RSA breach. Yep. About the RSA breach, because it was.
Oh, no kidding! I was there then. I don't think I got to see your talk though, but I was at Lincoln.
Yeah, it was in the big auditorium. And they gave me a unit coin for it, because I stood up there for like 3 hours talking at a whiteboard.
That's really cool. Yeah,
and they're big on coins.
And I remember that, and I still have it. If I wasn't worried about yanking out my headset or creating microphone noise, I'd go get it and bring it to the camera. But
on another episode, we'll have to do that.
I'll bring it on another episode. But it was memorable because I think everybody gets imposter syndrome. I get it. I'm sure Jacob gets it. But everybody in the audience had great questions, like really great questions. And I'd given whiteboard talks on this subject for forever, right? Because afterwards I called it the apology tour, right? I was a chief apology officer. But I had questions, and I got questions in that room I didn't get elsewhere. People were really thinking about what I was saying and then interacting it with, and that made it more fun. But I'm sure everybody in the audience was thinking the same thing, and I'm standing at the front thinking the same thing, like, what the heck am I doing here? So this is what we all get.
How rare is it that you actually have an audience that processes something and then has an intelligent response back to what you're saying in a presentation, just across the board at any presentation, right? I mean, I imagine you get the same thing, John.
Yeah. I would say, it's very exciting when that happens, you know, to get any questions sometimes, to get any sort of engagement. Sometimes you don't get those, but to get questions where like the first time I've ever heard a question, or to get a question that makes me rethink my own thoughts on things. Right. I've never thought about something the same way, and which is, I think my best quality is that I don't have any wedge issues within myself. Like, I can always consider someone else's point of view, and presented with new data, like, I will change my opinion on things, because I know that deep down, like, I feel like I'm a dumb person, right? So like, I know that I don't know everything, which is my best quality, I think.
That is the hallmark of intelligent people. People who aren't that smart think they're smart. Like, it's totally counterintuitive. And of course, he won't believe me. And of course, he'll still have imposter syndrome because I do the same thing. We all do it. It's true though. And actually it takes empathy to make a crowd lean in. You know who's great at this is Ed Davis, who was the former police commissioner for Boston during the Boston Marathon bombing.
Yeah.
So I did my graduate work in counterterrorism during COVID. I was like, this just fascinated me. And I now teach at the undergrad level, and I had him come talk to my class, and everybody listens because his heart is in it when he speaks. And when you can actually relate to a person in front of you and then do the same thing with an audience, it's empathy from the speaker. It's deep care. And
it's genuine too. It's not.
And I think that's what you were talking about a bit, John, right? It's this connection you have with the people across from you. It's not just a speech.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me of like my favorite class that I've ever taken in my life about the empathy piece and connecting with people, why it's so important in everyone's job. So I took this class that was called Acting for Managers, right? And what a fantastically and very, very Carnegie Mellon type mindset there. It's like thinking outside the box thing. But it was a management class that would basically teach you how to be an effective manager. But it was like there was like the theory part, and then there was practical end of the semester. And every week they would take some of the kids from the theater department, and you would go into the theater as a manager, and they would present you as the manager of the most ridiculous situations you could ever imagine. And you are live on stage with your employees, and they're like hashing out like relationships in the office, or like who the stinky person in the office is, and how do you navigate that as a manager, but to actually think about, what does it actually be to manager? You're not, it's not that like draconian, like follow the rules, but like being that people manager. And the stinky person in the office is the example that stuck with me. It'll stick with me for the rest of my life. And I did that one, and the teacher at the end, I had talked about, just like sensitively bringing it up, like, but effectively at the end of the day saying like, dude, you need to shower, right? Now, what we learned at the end was, the backstory of this character is that he was going through a divorce, and his wife had kicked him out of his house. They were stretched thin because their kids had medical problems on finances, so he's living out of his car. And he's like, had you got to that point of his story, like that's something a great manager would do, because the manager would help them out. Be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to front you some cash, or like, hey, we have gyms at the office or something along those lines. And that's what being an effective manager is to get out of like just trying to keep the office humming along as without issues, is to actually those managers that connect with people and actually try to elevate them in and outside of the office those are the leaders that you're going to want to follow. So
you can't go ahead, Jacob.
I was going to say, do you think it's systemic in cybersecurity where there's a lack of that because there's so much focus on just technical, right? Finding the right answer? I don't know. I don't have an opinion one way or another. I'm just curious.
I think, I don't know if it's systemic, right? Because I've met some really fantastic people who have the technical skills. I mean, Sam, you're a great example of this. You know just about a little of everything. Plus, you wrote Swordfish, so I don't know what other street cred you need.
I just gave him bad words here and there, like that. Firewall, like that's not writing.
I heard you wrote the entire script. That's what I heard.
It's not true.
Yeah, but even if you hear something that you don't agree with, I think you do a fantastic job of processing it and seeing the other person's point of view. Now, I do think that I have run across a lot of folks in security who there's like dead fast. It's like black or white, right? And the 50 shades of gray in cybersecurity is something that we need to, I kind of see this from dealing with, and I think it might actually be a symptom of the pressures put on security folks, is that in talking to like CISO level people or CSOs, I can remember when I did my first tabletop exercise for a company and presented this scenario, right? And it was just nothing, like that would never happen here. We have it solved. Like there's no way you could ever, you'll never steal data from here because we have DLP or something like that. First of all, it's like anyone who's ever done DLP
God, I hate that.
ever knows that
Most ineffective.
it's so impossibly hard to manage anyways. But okay. So like there was always this like, nope, like just fighting every kind of situation. And I think the problem is that is a symptom of there's so much pressure to be right 100% of the time. And that's happening from just like corporate policy. So I don't understand, like, how do we change that sort of like thinking that it's like, hey, if nothing else, if we have not learned anything else over the last 5 years, is that mistakes happen, right? And people are going to make mistakes. And it doesn't mean they're dumb or bad at their jobs, but let's like chill a little bit and actually think about what we're going to do in response to the mistakes that happen.
By the way, I totally agree with you there, but I think we also crave human connection. Maybe also when we're behind the Zoom screen a lot or Teams or whatever, and we wear a mask. And I think it's especially true of people who come out through formal organizations and control hierarchies, like the military often. There's you put on your game face, you put on your manager mask, you put on your CISO mask. And what I found is once you get through it, generally speaking, people are hungry for the human connection. And I mean hungry. And so the more you're your true self, and I don't mean like you just like, turn up and act like a weirdo, but the more your true self comes out, the more people respond to it. Sincere, right? And actually it's one of the basis for this podcast. One of the reasons we're doing it is we put ourselves out there and who we really are, and we want to meet who other people really are. And I think people will gravitate to that. But I think it's hard to break through that. And the consequence of it is people often burn out and they turn to substance abuse. And in fact, there are actually a number of support groups about mental health and hygiene. I think hygiene's the wrong word, but sanity, I guess, in our profession, because it's incredibly taxing to be always wearing a mask and always under pressure and anxiety. And, you are, you use the term warfighter, but we are cyber fighters all the time. And sometimes we're fighting our businesses to do stuff. So I think there's some of that in it too.
For sure. There's a lot. Yeah. I have to take a break. Like I'm very active on LinkedIn in terms of like posting, and same with Twitter. I try to post a lot of stuff, but I can't consume it because the more I consume, like I go down that spiral. It's like, it seems like everyone else in the world is just crushing it like every single day. And I'm like, I know that that's not true. But it's really easy for me to fall down that negative mindset to say like, why is everyone else so much better at everything than me, I was talking to someone about children there. Go ahead, Jacob. Yeah.
I was going to say it's particularly difficult in cybersecurity, where there's this ideal of what a technical, perfect cybersecurity person looks like, right? And I think a lot of people build that up in their head, and it has to go back to that I must succeed at like being the best person. And if you're not the best at XYZ, you don't know how to reverse engineer a Go binary, whatever the skill might be, you're not the best. And if you're not the best, then you suck. I think that is an attitude that a lot of people in cybersecurity have. Typically not people that make it very far up the ladder, but when you think about overall industry, there's less managers and there's less leaders than there is individual contributors. And I see that in the individual contributor layer very, very often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sam, the other thing to realize is, it's just that the higher you go, or not even higher, the longer you're in what we do, the deeper you go into cyber is maybe the better way to put it. The more you come to realize that some of your expertises will fade over time. And you can't do everything. Like, I look at my resume and go, man, if I was as good as all this, I wouldn't be as good as me. And I'm not, like, because some of the stuff I've done is decade ago or 2 decades ago. And we have to, I think people like to connect with the human being behind those resumes or behind the LinkedIn post. And when you actually see the real person, so my brother's in cyber. And by the way, whenever I post something and he comments or vice versa, people seem to really like it because they see a family connection as opposed to a veneer. Right. Yeah. I think that's it, Jacob. If it annoys you, I'd hope you'd tell me. But yeah, but I think it's this facade we've got to break through. And you mentioned tabletops. I think when people do tabletops, you see the real person under pressure, under stress. They're almost bonding experiences. So you're not only learning how to get better at what you do, you're learning, you need intimacy to have trust, and you need to know the other people, as well as everything else, credibility, reliability. My take is that when you're acting, some of it's real, and then you stop acting and your true self comes out to some degree. And do you do tabletops a lot then? Because you brought it up earlier. Is it?
No, I did.
Do you like that part?
Oh, I love tabletop exercises. That was my favorite. Like, I would say, looking back, when I first got into the game, so like when I first came over to IBM and I was just being a consultant, right? I loved, I think I fought tabletops because I thought they weren't technical enough, and I just wanted to do IR. That's it. I just wanted to do threat hunting and IR. And then as I got more comfortable with doing that stuff, I was like, you know what? I think I find more rewarding those tabletop exercises because I feel like you actually get to move the needle from an organization at the end of the day. And, I had one of my clients in Vancouver, like through those tabletop exercises, we just became like friends. Like, there was like a really good relationship that was built out of doing tabletop exercises because they felt like I was honest with the data, like with knowledge from everything that I had seen in the past, and just handing it off to them to be like, let's learn from this and get better together, was very rewarding, and it was mutual. So I learned to really love them. I think they're great.
Have you ever been asked to create a ridiculous scenario? Something where you thought it was ridiculous, but the business said, no, we really have to practice for this?
No, I don't think so. But I've always wanted to. I use this example of when I talk about threat hunting, and when I released the threat hunting framework last year, one of the things that spawned that was I was on this call, right? And I was doing some presentation on threat hunting, and something like this conference call is 45 different threat hunting teams, and they're arguing about what is or isn't threat hunting, right? And everyone had really, really strong opinions on what wasn't or what was threat hunting. And then we got into the weeds, and then I came out of that thinking does it really matter? Does it really matter? It should be an individual decision of what that means. What really matters is effectiveness, right? And that's what really at the end of the day. And so I'd use the example as I was talking to another client telling the same story, and then he was still dead fast. First thing we need to do is buy EDR. We can't do threat hunting without ED. We have to do it. And I was like, okay, I get what you're saying, and I understand why you're saying it, but I was like, what if the biggest threat to your organization is ninjas and you don't know that? Maybe no one cares about you from a cybersecurity point of view. Maybe there's a clan of ninjas that is the biggest threat to your company being able to complete their mission. Do you still need EDR, right? And then that was the light bulb kind of moment to be like, well, maybe I really need to rethink about what are actually the risks and threats that apply to my organization, and then I'll try to solution something. And that's a great way to go about it. And but yeah, so I started drafting up this situation where there was ninjas that were going to break into all
the organization.
We should option that, by the way. We should option the movie Ninja Fish as opposed to Swordfish. We should totally do that.
Right.
But you're right. I mean,
Sam's going to retribution and be like, we're going to get it. We're going to get it so accurate.
That's right.
Down to the bit.
We're going to use the right terms.
Yeah.
I'm going to nerd out on that. But that's cause. I mean, if you're not going back to the risks, why would the business trust us? We're just somebody who's trying to I got a thing I want to do. I'm obsessed. I have to do it. Why? Because I have to do it. But the business doesn't talk to us. So if we're not talking risk to them, what is the language? Right? It has to be, I think.
It has to be dollars. I mean, let's be honest. People get into business to make money in America. That's tangible.
And to avoid losses. People will pay you to take risk and to take
But that's a factor of money.
Yeah.
Avoiding losses.
I agree with you. It is. But it's not all the same aspect of money. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Sam, I got a question for you. You talk to probably more executives outside of cyber than I do. And I feel like 2023, I keep on referring it to as the revenge of the CFO, right? And
yes,
I get this feeling that spent like that blank check that was for cybersecurity that was happening in the previous 4 or 5 years is no longer there. And are you, when you talk to executives outside of security, are they asking those questions about, well, what is the risk of it? And then break that down into, like, can you quantify that risk to me before I'm authorizing spending?
Well, there's a few things in motion. One is that the SEC has talked about putting pressure on boards to have cyber talent, but I don't think it's going to be dedicated talent. I don't think they're going to start hiring like cyber people. They'll hire people that do other things, but have a smidge of cyber talent, right? And there may be advisory roles for people who are cyber people. The biggest problem in cyber, as far as I can see, I hate cyber, but it's the term we use, right? But InfoSec is the gap between the security departments and the business. We still don't speak the same language. We just don't.
Right.
I mean, if the only conversation we're having is with IT, then we're failing. But they do talk about risk in the CFO's department. They talk about legal, financial, and operational risk, but they don't use the same language. And one of the things I did at my last gig was talk to the CFO a lot. Like, he was probably the person I spoke to the most. He was also really interesting as a person. Russ is a really great guy. And he's fascinating, right? And has similar interests to me. And I showed him my risk registry, and we happen to use a similar language now for risk registry among all the different types of risk, or right before I left. But that's the exception. It's super rare. Now, the pressure from a regulatory perspective is still going up. Like, for instance, I was talking to some higher ed folks just this week, and they were saying that they now have to deal with GLBA coming into the education space because they're financial institutions, because they're involved in loans. We've also got things like the Cyber Resilience Act in Europe, which is going to be like GDPR for cyber. So it's not, when I started in this industry, we didn't call it cyber, but we were 1% of IT to 1.5% was going into security. I remember when it eclipsed storage. That was like a huge deal. It passed storage at about 8%. And it's now, I haven't looked at the latest analysts, but it's north of 13, 14%. That can't continue, by the way. Yeah. It has to at some point level out and drop as parts of it commoditize. But until we actually beat the bad guys, then regulations are going to increase, pressure is going to increase, and people are going to hate it. Nobody wants to be spending what Jacob said, our precious money on that tax. So the more we align to what the business actually cares about and stop just buying EDR for the sake of EDR, or, let's get the 2FAs, or whatever. The more we do that and show how we're increasing flexibility or embracing new stuff, and until we show that this actually matters for missing, like why it matters to keep the dollars back in the building, they're going to hate us even more. But to answer your question, I don't see it getting any lighter. But I do see it getting more contentious, which means I see pressure on CISOs going up and burnout and turnover. Because as soon as a new general counsel comes in, or a CFO, you have to prove yourself all over again. Most of the CISOs I know, they lose their job either after a breach or when their peers in other departments come in and go, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you spending all this money on X? Right.
You don't think the spend is going to go down? Because from my perspective, and people from a business leadership perspective in sales and folks I've talked to across the board in multiple organizations, all are saying every purchase the CFO is reviewing for cyber. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you can't tie back to exactly why this matters, you're not getting any purchase orders through.
Well, put it this way. Your business might have to, your industry might have to, but overall, no more than anything else is going to go down. So relatively speaking.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. The boat will rise and fall like everything else based on macro conditions. But look, when we were cutting spending at the last company that you and I both worked at, Jacob, cyber had the least impacted department. It did.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. In other words, it's not recession proof, but it's more resilient than most budgets. You simply can't not do it. Now, take a look at Twitter, right? So in comes Elon, and he says, firing a bunch of you, and then a bunch of people quit. And, oh, look, there's no security department, even though it's mandated. Class action lawsuit. That's going to be painful. You can do it, but it's not comfortable, I have to imagine.
He also purposely flies in the face of regulation to see where they'll land. He does it
And
to
you
test
can do
them and
that
see.
for a lot of billions. You can do that, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
lawyers.
Facebook's doing it right. Again, this is opinion. I'll say Facebook is doing it with GDPR constantly. If you look at the violations, they have top 5. Meta or Facebook has top 5.
It's just the cost of
fines.
doing business now.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like my buddy who he just like he has no concern for parking tickets. So he's like, that's not a fine.
He's
like, that's
scofflaw.
just what it costs to park there.
Yeah.
He's like, that's what it costs to park there.
Cheap,
And he just
it's cheaper
pays
than
parking.
right?
It's always like, oh my God, why have I not thought of that before? And he's like, yeah, I just pay the parking ticket. It's whatever it costs to park there. It's probably very similar, you know?
Yeah. There's a Seinfeld episode I think it's called The Scofflaw, where like they're trying to find this guy. It's like it's the Moby Dick white whale, like the parking guy's trying to find this one person with all the tickets. Yeah. It's that's exactly what happens, by the way. It's why fines go up. What's that?
I don't think I've seen that episode.
You'll always say that people. I bet, Jacob, you say I haven't seen that episode. Then you watch it in 10 minutes, and you're like, oh yeah.
You've
To be
seen
fair,
it.
I can't remember most of anything in life at any given moment.
Which is great. Everything's fresh.
Everyone's already seen every episode of Seinfeld, whether they know it or not. Everyone's seen every episode.
Right. All right, let's transition. Let's talk about hobbies and stuff. Yeah,
we should talk about things. So how about anything that's not cyber? What do you like to
Anything
do
that's not
outside of the
cyber time.
office? Yeah. Well, no, I mean, you can tie it back if you want. We're not going to stop you. But if you're like, I go home and I like to build systems.
I do not touch once I'm done working, I do not touch a computer. No.
So what do you do?
I so much don't touch a computer. Like I pay for all of my media. Like I don't do Plex or anything anymore. Like I'm total just buy the app and pay the scripts. Like I just don't do anything tech outside of it. So what do I do? So I got 2 little kids, so they take up a lot of my time.
How old are
they? How old?
3 and 6.
Mine are 6 and 10. So yeah, you're at a great age with them.
A lot of soccer and swimming practices and all of that, which is great. You know, that's very fulfilling part of my life. And then I still play soccer. Like
Pickup leagues?
Yes, this is a great story. So, So the first time I when I moved to Pittsburgh, my buddy from college, because I played soccer in college, and one of my teammates got me on this Thursday night men's league team. It's just old guys, 35 and over. I was like, perfect.
You can hear the knees cracking.
No fights or anything. Everyone there's just having a good time. So the games are Thursday evenings, and so play the first game, played really well. I thought I crushed it. Go home right after the game, and my buddy texted me. He's like, dude, everyone's really pissed. And I was like, what? He's like, what? I thought I played great. You know, I had a couple goals, assists. I was like, great night. And he's like, no. He's like, you can't be going home right after the game, because if everyone else's wives find out that they can be home at 10:30 and everyone else rolls in at 2 a.m., then that's going to be a real problem. So then I showed up to the next game. I brought 230 racks. I was like, I get it now. And so it's a great, great league. So that's like my Thursday nights. And I have a great group of friends from like the gym and stuff like that I hang out with. When there's time.
I used to play rugby years ago. Soccer I did as a kid, but in rugby there were 3 competitions whenever we played. Right, there was the game, but you could lose the game and you could win the day. Right, the second competition was, well, I'll say it was drinking. Right, it was like you would see which team drank more. Right, and then the third one was singing. And I know that sounds weird, but when you're drinking and you just beat each other up on the field, and you know a bunch of songs, then you can have a singing competition. So every team had a bard back in those days. So somebody who knew all the songs, and you just go back and forth until you ran out of them. And it was fun, a lot of fun.
Rugby.
Yeah, the rugby. I remember the rugby. There was like rugby club teams at my school, and it was basically like drinking clubs. And I was like, they got it figured out.
That's what they are. Yeah.
They got it figured out. My grandfather.
It should be varsity.
When he passed away, we got all of his stuff, right? And he went to Princeton, and they had outside of the fraternities, they had these things called like the social clubs.
Yep.
And I got one of these jackets, big orange jacket, and it's canvas. And I was like, well, I was asking my grandma, I was like, well, why are these jackets like so thick? Like, and he was like, and she told me that whenever they would have dinner, they would be drinking so much beer and they'd be like spraying beer all over themselves. And they wore these like canvas jackets to keep their underclothes dry so they didn't get soaked in beer. So I got that.
That's amazing.
Jacket.
Why don't we do that? How did we lose this wisdom?
Social clubs still exist. I'm part of one. I recently joined one. So as an adult,
you wear giant canvas
You need
jackets?
a giant canvas jacket.
I don't know. I did get in trouble for rolling up my sleeves when I went to the social club. So it's serious business. Yeah.
Wow.
You need to make it less serious and get some beer drinking jackets.
But they're a bit what's the right phrasing for this? The politically correct stuck in their ways. Is that the best way I can put it? Right.
Traditional
people.
Traditional.
Sure, traditional is the right
That's
word.
what I said. Whatever I said before to scratch that, it's traditional.
They're helping to prevent burnout with traditional values.
They're helping to prevent people like me who arguably prefer hoodies and shorts to a suit jacket.
Because you have to get dressed up to go.
You do. Yeah, you do. Wow. You have to wear a suit jacket. You got to have loafers or whatever they say.
That's probably nice post-COVID to have a reason to go and get dressed like an adult.
It's the only reason I'm part of it, and it's other people across all business disciplines go. Right, really, it's a business club. So you just run into people that are insurance brokers or lawyers or whatever it is, and you get more stories that are outside your discipline, which I find nice.
It's sort of like a higher brow version of Rotary Club, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You'll have to join me sometime, Sam. You can come out.
I would love to. I'll have to see if I can find a jacket.
John, you're always invited, of course. But
yes,
it's a haul for you.
Well, I'm in Boston all the time, so
Just for work, or do you come up for?
Yeah. Well, the cyber range. Did you guys ever go over there?
No, you never invited us.
Cambridge?
State one or?
The IBM
the IBM
security
one. Yeah, I have a lot of friends
Cambridge.
who've been through there, but I've never been to visit. No.
Oh,
I'd love to.
Yeah, it's sick. We should set something up there next time.
That'd be awesome.
Just come and hang out.
Yeah, I would love. Absolutely.
Let's do a live podcast recording with you.
We could do that at the cyber range. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have a camera. We'll walk around with it and that sort of thing. And
yeah. So outside of work, I don't know. I play music. I still do that.
Well, instruments or play music. What does it mean?
I had dreams of when I was a dirty undergrad of becoming a musician for real, right? Like I was
showering, playing guitar.
I was gonna
what's the instrument? What's the what do you play?
Guitar and piano, mostly guitar. Played a lot of coffee shops around and a lot of pubs around the northern West Virginia Panhandle.
So you really went into
2000s.
it.
I gave it a shot. Yeah. I gave it a shot. Yeah. Turns out that, and this is I don't know if you guys ever seen that show, Treme on HBO.
No, give us the premise.
It's about, so it's from the makers of The Wire. They do basically it's post-Katrina show in New Orleans. And it's fantastic. I loved it. But they have a
recommendation for the audience?
Yes, I love that show. It's HBO. HBO Max, still watch it.
And is it fictional or is it nonfiction about the people after Katrina?
It's fictional.
Or is it based on fiction? It's based on real things,
based on real life events.
Drama?
Yeah, for sure. But one of the characters in there is a struggling artist, musician person going in there, and this older, wiser musician says, the world is full of good players, right? And why is songwriting so hard? And it was like those are that's the part that's really hard. Those are the 1% of the 1% players you can find everywhere, right? And I realized that because you can be really. There's always going to be someone who's better than you at the instrument, but creating something new and fresh is like the real kind of talent. And
insanely difficult.
I should mention something because one of the things we want to do on the podcast is talk about things happening in the news and stuff. And I support a guy named Dan Miesler. I don't know if you guys know him through Patreon. A shout out to Dan because he's awesome. I don't know him personally, although we're connected. But I feel like he's a brother by another mother. Like he reads things I like. He talks about subjects I'm interested in, and he just wrote about ChatGPT's impact on society, or rather what's going to come next. And part of it was he's actually predicting an explosion in creativity. And the reason for that is he talked about exactly what you just said, that 1% of 1% of 1% that can be seen, even though there's perhaps millions of people who are very brilliant and artistic, but they just don't know the people and aren't in Hollywood or aren't connected to someone. The explosion in what generative language models and AI are going to do is make a lot of that easier to get to audiences and to be found. And so musicians and writers and people who are brilliant in other ways are suddenly going to have an explosion in creativity and be found. I highly recommend reading it. If you go look at it, his name's Dan Miesler, but he's a thinker about what's
really
happening
interesting take.
And where is it going. He had a lot of other predictions, but you just sparked that one. And I thought, hey, I was just reading about it, and I just myself recorded something on security and generative language models specifically, but his insight there, I thought, I'm still noodling it a bit, is really interesting. And I'm not doing justice to the argument. It's worth reading.
It's a thought that has bounced around in my head so many times, is like, is it harder or easier now to be discovered if you are some sort of artist? Like, obviously I think of musicians, right? But, and was it in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, before social media, did you have to be so good that you would get discovered, or did someone make you?
So listen, if you haven't listened to the Taylor Swift story on this, she spent so much of her time as a child forcing her parents to move to Tennessee, forcing them to like go out to studios, so for her, she kind of got the marketing from the beginning. And so everyone says she's the best, most talented, but from the beginning, she went and forced herself into the industry. So sorry, you were finishing a thought though, John.
Well, I was just going to say, with things like Instagram and TikTok and things like that, like anyone, anywhere can get an audience. And if you gain enough of a following, you're probably going to get a deal somewhere, and then you'll be made. And I wondered, but then because there's so many people out there now, do you get lost in the sea of TikToks and Instagrams of talent versus being able to stand out? And I wondered, and I don't know the answer if it's easier or harder now.
Well, I keep thinking, like, let's jump to cyber and then we'll jump back to this. So in the world of cybersecurity, if you start using things like ChatGPT to guide defense, you'll become very predictable. And therefore attackers will find ways around you quite easily, which means you still need initiative and to be breaking away from where most people are going in order to be able to find the attacker, and probably on offense too. And then that makes me think, so you've got things like auto-tune in the music industry, and you've got like where the audience goes. I suspect that what ChatGPT will help us find the unique to some degree, or its derivatives, right? And its and parallel offerings will say, find me the special, find me the difference. So as long as people are intelligently seeking out good quality art, as opposed to just harmony and melody that is what they're used to getting, then if anybody is truly doing something artistically different or something that is truly standing out and has merit, then the chances of it being found, I think, will go up. In other words, if you produce good signal against the noise, your chance of the signal being found will mean you don't have to be in Tennessee in specific areas and going to specific clubs. I think. I could be off, but I'm hoping that's the case.
I mean, the baseline.
Then again, we could just have AI overlords and we'll see,
I'm looking forward to it for one.
Yeah. I want myself. We just got to figure out self-driving cars. You know what? Honestly, tangential story again, but in grad school, I wrote this paper about how self-driving cars were how much impact they would have to the real estate market. About like if you had a self-driving car, then you could work for 2 hours on your way to the office.
I like sleep.
Or sleep. Take your meetings and then have your meetings and then leave, and then you just work in transit, and now you can live 3 hours away from the office, right? So there's no need to be around a city center and
you could go faster.
And you were right.
The cars can have there'd be less stuck in traffic and higher.
Yeah, because you can be closer together, right? Like you're increasing throughput because all the cars are talking to each other. It's like, I need to get off here, and then they all adjust and make a move. But I mean, COVID, I feel like proved me to be right.
Yeah,
that once we all teleworked, people started moving out of the cities and going into the exoburbs or whatever they're called right now. And now we have what are organizations do? They're like people that I don't know what they're going to do. Like they have all this real estate and
they don't know what they're going to do.
Force people to come back, I guess.
They're trying. I mean, it's backroom conversations that don't get surfaced very often.
I'm a weirdo and would go back. I'm actually work out of my friend's real estate office because I can't work from home anymore.
That's ironic that he has to let you use the real estate space.
Yeah. I'm like all set from work from home. I just want to be around the people.
Well, here in Boston, Tuesdays and Thursdays are atrocious for traffic because that's when everybody has to go in. And if you go in Mondays are okay, but if you go in Wednesday, if you go in Friday, clear sailing. Just got to know the patterns.
Yeah, so I guess I don't know what the organization is going to do, but those leases still got to get paid, right? And if there's no one in there, then...
And if they don't get paid, then there's a cascade effect.
Yeah. What is going to happen?
What?
I wonder, like, there's going to be case study we're living history right now about like all of the interesting impacts of what the pandemic did for the next 5 to 10 years of like how it's going to impact real estate, population growth, and how many are we going to have an explosion of doctors because young kids lived through the pandemic and became super interested in medical sciences when they were, and that like sparked their passion and they're ever going to go to med school. I don't know. Hopefully that'd be cool. But
this whole thing's an ancestor simulation anyway. We just got to figure out what it is they're testing with it, right? It's is this the impact of COVID on society, or high inflation, or a war in the Ukraine? Who knows? But
Well, when you have everything happen at once, it's really hard to break down what the micro causes of the outputs are, because there's so many inputs into the system right now. You can't determine what the outputs are, just like ChatGPT, right?
That's right.
Bring it all around.
I think it's all about AI anyway, so we'll see.
We're going to get back there. Everything goes back to ChatGPT. If nothing, learned nothing else in 2023 is that everything goes back to ChatGPT.
Yeah, I mean, it exploded on the scene. Just the growth of it was insanity. But yeah, and the capabilities are growing. Almost everyone I talk to who's in a knowledge worker industry is saying, I'm trying to figure out how to deal with it, right? Especially code writing.
I think it's amazing.
I think it's great. Yeah. I was a hater at first. I was like, just doing stupid. And then I used it and I was like, oh, this is like my personal Googler for me. I'm like, if I wanted to grab a snippet and be like, hey, well, if I was going to, I have trouble retaining basically anything, right? So I have Googled the same thing on Stack Overflow for like writing a particular thing in Python probably 150 times in my life. And now I just go to ChatGPT and I was like, hey, can you write me this one function? And it will get 85% of it right. And then by the time I have it, I can figure that out. And I'm like, this is great. It's like this is what Google Assistant should be.
You have to know enough about what you're asking it about to know when it's right and wrong. So it saves you efficiency, in my opinion. You have to validate its outputs, though. And so that's why I don't think it's extremely disruptive. I think you could do the work of maybe 3 employees with one, potentially in certain areas.
And higher quality too.
Ooh, I wonder if we're going to have software flaw bias because of ChatGPT, because engineers are using it, and then everyone's going to have the same vulnerabilities.
Yes.
And will we have poisoning by opponents? Will people start to put code out there?
I 100% think so.
Yeah, that algorithm's real quick.
Yeah,
I don't know if Sam, are you on Instagram?
Yeah,
you are.
I have.
So you guys know, like you have to curate that. You got to curate that algo, because as soon as you accidentally click on something else, then you're suddenly served like a million. And I'm like, I don't want that. And you have to go back and you have to like retrain the engine to be like, no, I'm serious.
It's always something stupid too that you click on. You're like, all right, if I'll watch this one stupid video once.
Yeah. Just shaming me. Yes, I watched that cat video. Now don't leave me alone.
And then my wife looks at me and goes, "You watch that? Like, why is it serving that?" And I'm like,
I don't know. Yeah. That's funny. Well, we've done almost an hour. Does this feel like a natural? It feels natural to me.
This feels like it.
I don't know what you guys do outside of work, and now I want to know.
We don't. I'm not allowed out of the room here. It's really rough. No, I'm just kidding. But I actually teach. I think I mentioned that. Like I found it quite recently. So I teach cyber terrorism, and I teach cyber, especially for MBAs, and so I teach at a technical school and at a business school. I like to tabletop game with my friends, and during COVID, I started to find my old high school friends and college friends because we all started doing it on Zoom. So figuring out time zones became a problem. Like I have friends in Europe and friends in California, in Canada, which is just a wasteland. I'm joking for any Canadians out there. I am, but hey, I'm Canadian. But like finding all these all these people, and reconnecting was a big thing too.
That's awesome.
And you, Jacob?
Yeah, I collect hobbies. So I think it's...
You collect hobbies, like
I collect
specifically?
hobbies. My hobby's collecting hobbies. I do a little bit of everything outside of work. I think the learning of something is what really excites me more than the repetitive doing of things, which makes a lot of sense for the way I am, right? So I do a little bit of music. I cook. I have a garden. I hike a lot. I try to get outside and ski. I'll exercise sometimes. I've done art of any type. I've tried to learn different art forms just to do it, right? And it's fun. It's exciting. And I think developing
You're a Renaissance
skills.
man. That's what you are.
What's that?
Yeah.
So Renaissance.
You're a Renaissance
I'll
man.
take that. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I like it. So yeah, I mean, in the winter, it's pretty standard for me because I like skiing so much. It's like adrenaline drives me. It's a miracle I've lived this long, to be fair. And it's probably a longer story from other podcasts of how much I'll reveal of how close to death I've come. But
that same thing has happened to me. I've had near-death experiences far too often.
Is it just that all humans have near-death experiences, so some of us make it through the filter by chance, or do some of us engage in higher risk activities and we just happen to make it through, right?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the longer you live, the more experiences you have. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say that I've had a ton of them. I've had like one really scary one, but then I don't know. I don't know if I've had that many.
I had a woman I used to work with. So I was struck by lightning in the 80s, which was rough.
So you really shouldn't be here, Sam, is what you're saying.
I really shouldn't. I also had a head-on collision and broke my neck once, and I had a motorcycle accident. Like, I've had a lot, and that's just the start. But I had this woman I used to work with named Janet in the 90s, and I used to drive in Canada with rear-wheel drive, and it was like a Buick, 1972 Buick Skylark, right? Which is just stupid. Oh, yeah. And it was like the rear wheels would just spin out all the time. And so I used to take this road called the Queensway to work. And half the time, she said, in the winter, I would see you in the median strip or spun off. And she said to me, my husband, Fred, and I have been talking, and we are convinced there's a deity of cosmic proportions out to kill you. But there's one just a little bigger out to save your ass every time something happens. And she said, because like something crazy happens to you, and then something really cool happens that just saves you at the last minute. And that's been pretty true. But I don't know why. I'm going to stick to the ancestor simulation.
Would you say that you've engaged in risky behaviors, Sam?
No,
that have
I'm a
led to
CISO.
these, or are these just like incidental?
You're a doctor? Is this
I like hide in the hotel room on business trips. Like, don't come near me. And, and I avoid that risky stuff, and yet it happens anyway.
Wow. Final destination.
So the point of this podcast is live your life, because even if you avoid it, you might almost die.
Live it to the max, man. Live
it to the max.
The 9 lives of cyber. Yep.
9 lives of cyber. How many of you used up? Do you have a tally board? Do you have a whiteboard behind you?
No, because that will jinx it, and that will be my last one right there.
I just want to know, how long are we going to be able to run this for before you hit 9?
Cool.
All right. Well, John, you know a little bit about us now, and so we'll have to.
Wow, great.
We'll have to
John,
chat
thank
more
you for
on
being
this.
part of this.
I definitely want to do the cyber range one. We should definitely do that. I'm inviting myself onto the show again.
So next time you come up and have the time, because I know sometimes these are short trips, but next time you come up and have the time, let us know. Yeah. I think I'm the closest to the cyber range. Jacob, I think you're a little bit further out, but we can an hour. Yeah, I'm like half an hour away, so we'll definitely meet you there.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, we should definitely do that.
All right. Until the next one, John. We really appreciate having you.
Yeah, it's great. This was great.
Cool.
This is really great. I appreciate you guys having me on.